there will be a grand jury that she will turn this case over to once they have collected all the information.
The investigation into the death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells is picking up speed as it's now being reported this case may be headed to a grand jury, just as newly released GPS data and dispatch audio are raising new questions about what happened in Nolan's final hours. We're going to break it all down and what this could mean right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law.
At 4:31 in the afternoon on the 4th of July, a boat pulled away from the dock at Horn Island, Mississippi, and 18-year-old Nolan Wells was not on board. That single detail, now confirmed by GPS data obtained from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, is the anchor point for a case that has gone from a holiday weekend tragedy to a full-blown national mystery. And this week, 2 new pieces of evidence just made it a whole lot stranger. If you're not caught up yet, here's what we know. Nolan Wells, an 18-year-old college football player from Mississippi, went out on a boat with a group of friends to Horn Island for the 4th of July. He was reportedly last seen around 3 in the afternoon, talking with a girl he'd just met on the island. His friends say he chose to stay behind, planning to catch a ride back with another group later that night. He never made it home. 2 days later, his body was recovered in the water near the island. Jackson County Sheriff LeBetter initially said there was no reason to suspect foul play. But almost 2 weeks later, this case is nowhere close to closed, and the family, backed by civil rights attorney Ben Crump, has been demanding real answers ever since. This isn't just a local Mississippi story anymore either. Between the online speculation, a nationally known attorney getting involved, and a family that has flatly refused to accept the first version of events, this has become one of the most closely watched death investigations in the country right now. So let's start with the GPS data because...
And by the way, let me go to this part. So CBS News obtained GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and it tracks the boat's movement. So I want to walk through that timeline. This is information they say they obtained via records request. So it appears to suggest that this boat, this vessel, left the dock at approximately 9:56 that morning, arrived at Horn Island at 11:14. According to GPS data, the boat then reportedly left Horn Island at 4:31 that afternoon, returned to its original departure dock, then traveled into Fort Bayou at around 5:52 before returning to the dock at 6:06. Later that evening, the boat went into the Fort Bayou boat launch at 7:19, traveled overland, which would suggest that it was possibly towed by a vehicle to the owner's residence. And to just kind of put this into perspective, I believe Ben Crump has claimed that Nolan was last seen on the island at 3 p.m. Tyler, what do you take away from this GPS data?
the timeline it lays out is honestly hard to wrap your head around. Records show the boat left its home dock around 9:56 that morning and reached Horn Island by 11:14. Fine so far. But here's where it gets strange. Nolan was allegedly last seen on the island at 3 p.m. The boat, according to this same GPS data, didn't actually leave the island until 4:31, almost 90 minutes later.
That if he was last seen on the island at 3 p.m. and they apparently, not only did they leave there, go to another area, then go to dock and get towed, there's a lot that could have transpired between that time, especially putting that in conjunction with the text messages and Snapchat history that was allegedly deleted from his phone or missing from his phone. So there's a lot of time for people to get their stories straight, to talk to maybe counsel or others about what needs to be the narrative when they arrive. Now, I'm speculating to a lot of this because we don't know. There has been no interrogation of these individuals. There's been no official statements that have been issued, but it's clear that there's been a significant period of time between the boat leaving, the last time Nolan was seen, and this boat getting back to its original owner.
And look, it confirms, or it seems to confirm, right, this boat left 4:31. We still have conflicting accounts about whether Nolan chose to stay behind or he was left behind. And this deep GPS data is going to be an important role, it seems. I will say this.
So what was happening in that window? Nobody said, at least not on the record. And it doesn't stop there. After leaving Horn Island, the boat didn't head straight home. It traveled to an area called Fort Bayou, arriving around 5:52 and returning to the original dock by 6:06. Then, later that same evening, around 7:19, the boat shows up again at a boat launch in Fort Bayou. and from there it appears to have been physically towed overland back to its owner's home. That's a lot of movement, a lot of stops, and a lot of unexplained time for a group of friends who, by their own account, left the island because their boat was taking on water. Which brings us to the second major piece of new evidence, the audio. A call placed to a private towing company right around the time the group left Horn Island has now surfaced, and in it, one of the boys on board can be heard telling the dispatcher that the boat's bilge pump had failed and that they were taking on water near the west tip of the island. The dispatcher asks if everyone is accounted for and in good health.
Why wouldn't he have taken his phone? So some interesting questions there. And we should also point out that the phone is currently in the hands of Crump's independent investigators. That's what the reporting suggests. And by the way, the family recovered Nolan's phone using the Life 360 app, and they have apparently had it since. And then we have this. This is big too. This is a big update. New details are emerging about the timeline surrounding Nolan's death. What do I mean? NBC News has obtained audio of what seems to be Nolan's friends calling for help when that boat that he was in trouble. Listen to this.
We're sinking. Can y'all please come?
And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's on board.
So from that little bit and reporting by outlets like NBC News and the New York Post, it seems that boat likely had 7 people on board. The boat was having trouble at around 4 p.m. The boat operator reportedly said, "Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn and our bilge pump stopped working. I want to get this boat unsank and towed back." That boat was reportedly towed for 3 miles. It picked up speed less than an hour later. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit more. And look, we also know from the Jackson County Sheriff, again, John Ledbetter, that Nolan did not come back on that boat. We don't know for certain if Nolan was on that boat during the call or if he was already off the boat at that point. But look, as far as we can tell, what we seem to know is that at some point between that call and 4:31 p.m., when the boat left, it seems Nolan was no longer with them.
The answer that comes back is that everyone is on board. Here's the problem. We don't actually know if that call happened before or after Nolan was left behind. If he was still with the group at that point, why does nobody remember it that way now? And if he wasn't, that raises an even bigger question. When exactly did the group realize he wasn't coming back? And why did it take as long as it did for anyone outside their circle to find out? This is where the case stops being just a story about a malfunctioning boat and starts being about a 90-minute window that, right now, nobody can fully account for. And that gap is a big part of why, according to the family's legal
I want
team...
to start with what we learned at this press conference about this grand jury. So Ben Crump announced that the family met with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McGrath, and arguably the biggest takeaway from that meeting came directly from Crump.
She shared with the family that there will be a grand jury that she will turn this case over to once they have collected all the information and finished their investigation. We also agreed that we will have a mutual inspection of the cell phone with our experts and their experts. Attorney Eric Hertz is helping lead the investigation team with former law enforcement experts who are going to help us with the cell phone download. So everybody will be able to see at the same time what the cell phone has. We also talked about trying to make sure we dot every I and cross every T. I know that we're getting about 50 calls a day to 100 calls a day from people who were there on Horn Island, people who are familiar with individuals that were there on Horn Island. And so we continue to be steadfast in trying to get to the truth of why Nolan Wells
This case may now be headed to a grand jury. To be clear, a grand jury doesn't automatically mean criminal charges are coming. It means a prosecutor believes there's enough here for a group of citizens to review the evidence and decide whether charges are warranted, whether that's something as serious as a homicide charge.
In other words, you're saying anybody looks at that and looks at a headline like, oh my gosh, you're talking homicide charges, but not necessarily. It could be something with respect to the investigation, like whether it's tampering with evidence or misleading police, something. I'm not saying those things happen, but that's what you're suggesting.
Right. It's anything that's a criminal charge pertaining to the disappearance and the death of this young man here could be a criminal charge. It could be obstruction of justice. All right, you could have some accessories after the fact. We don't know if it's going to be homicide or murder, but there could be some criminal charge that could come out of this. And I think that's all the family has been asking for, is a fair investigation so they can know.
Something lesser like obstruction or nothing at all. Prosecutors carry full discretion here, and grand jury proceedings in Mississippi are sealed. So even once evidence is presented,
Grand jury proceedings are secretive. So there will be, for example, no media coverage of the grand jury. There's no defense lawyers are not allowed to be there. The victim's family attorney, Ben Crump, won't be able to be there. It'll be a prosecutor who's presenting the case to the grand jury that's been impaneled. If they decline to press charges, there will ultimately be questions. People may wonder whether this grand jury was spoon-fed information that would lead them to come to a conclusion of there being no probable cause for an arrest. But I do believe if they do find that there's criminal charges out of the materials that are presented to them, it would affirm some of those suspicions that so many people have about how this has been handled and all the gaps that appear to be present in this investigation in the aftermath of.
the public may never learn exactly what was said or why a particular decision was reached. What we do know is that District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath has now met directly with Nolan's family, something legal experts say almost never happens this early in a case like this, and many are reading it as.
This DA said that she commonly meets with families who have lost loved ones. That's one thing that she did say. But out of this, where you have a sheriff that said there's no foul play initially, and then you have the family demand an independent investigation, and then you have a meeting between the family and along with the family's lawyer, that is very significant. I think that shows that the public pressure and the national attention to this area of Mississippi has made the DA change some of the way she's addressing this by meeting with the victim's family and even coming to the extent of doing some joint things together with the victim's family and their attorney. That's not common in situations like this.
What would it say to you if they don't impanel a grand jury, if they don't present evidence to a grand jury, or they do present evidence to a grand jury and the grand jury chooses not to indict? A, two parts of that. What would that signal to you? And B, would we know about any of that?
A sign of just how much pressure this investigation is under. And the questions keep piling up. There's the matter of Nolan's phone. According to the family, it was recovered using a location tracking app and has remained in their possession, not law enforcement's, for some time. Investigators and the family's own experts have now agreed to what's being called a mutual inspection, meaning both sides will examine the device together, side by side,
The police, and they're being accessible.
So let me go on to this other major development from this week's press conference. The family is now going to be allowed to inspect Nolan's phone alongside investigators. There's going to be this mutual inspection where both sides will see the contents at the same time. Tyler, is that unusual? Let's first start there.
That's highly unusual. It's highly unusual that a victim's family, along with their attorney, would be allowed to participate with law enforcement in the inspection of a cell phone data that is really the crux, one of the crucial pieces of evidence with this case. I don't think that would have happened without a lot of the chatter going on around the country about how this investigation has transpired, and it shows there's some distrust between the family and law enforcement here. And there, from my
make sure
understanding,
nothing gets lost, altered, or conveniently left unexplained. The family reportedly believes messages and Snapchat data may have already been deleted from the phone before it ever reached them, which leads to maybe the strangest detail in this entire case. Why wasn't Nolan carrying his phone in the first place? One friend has said it's completely normal to leave phones on the boat to protect them from salt water. That there was a small pile of them sitting on the dash that day. Maybe so. But Nolan was reportedly texting and talking with a girl he'd just met. And if he was hoping to spend more time with her...
We've covered those cases all the time. I do think the location of the phone is another key component about this, right? So the family has said that, first of all, it was unusual that Nolan would go off on his own, but also the idea that he would leave his phone behind. You know, what teenager puts their phone down? But then you have this friend of Nolan's who told ABC News that, look, it's normal to leave phones on the boat. You're protecting them from the salt water. He said all their friends were out there, that they were not communicating with anyone else. Who else would they talk to? And he said that when Nolan got in the boat, he put his phone on the boat's dash along with probably 15 other phones. How do you see it?
That's not usual. I mean, even taking for what we've heard that there was a young lady that he met named Katie and that he was interested in talking to her, you would think that he would want to be able to text her later on or get in contact with her later. I don't know many 18-year-olds who aren't glued to the hip to their phone. And even if they put their phone somewhere, if they're going to stay behind, they would definitely grab their phone. And so I think that seems suspicious, if anything. I hear the friend's position on it, but it draws many people some ire and gets to the same conclusion of that doesn't sound like the 18-year-olds and 23-year-olds that we know. They like to have their phones on them and keep
You'd
them.
think he'd want a way to reach her. It's a small detail, but small details are often what mysteries are built on. There's also this, which is easy to miss but worth pointing out. The boat's owner, his mother, and at least one other person who was on the island that day have reportedly cooperated with investigators. That sounds reassuring on the surface, but cooperating isn't the same thing as testifying under oath. And
I will say this, this report, this MSDMR report, also indicates that the boat's owner, his mother, and one other individual who was reportedly with Nolan on the day of this incident have cooperated with the investigation. What does that mean to you that they have cooperated?
It means that they probably have been accessible to law enforcement, that they at least have their contact information, they're being responsive to law enforcement. The question regarding cooperating is to what extent. Now, will they testify between the grand jury? Before a grand jury, or will they have to plead the fifth before a grand jury? Just because they are cooperating does not mean they're all being completely forthcoming. We don't know to what extent their role is, what information that they have. They could be cooperating through counsel. So, which is nothing wrong with cooperating through counsel, but I think it at least shows that they aren't stonewalling the
This
police
case,
and they're
there's
being
been a
accessible.
lot of misinformation that has been spreading online. You know, in our last episode, we addressed this viral video that has been circulating, the one that was initially believed to show Nolan in some sort of argument over his phone. But a friend of Nolan's later came forward to the media and said it wasn't Nolan in the video. It was him. He had this argument. And Ben Crump acknowledged that they're getting conflicting accounts.
That's what a witness told us, and that's what we reported out. Then another witness had come forward and said, no, that was his voice. We have other witnesses who said there were other altercations. So as Mr. Hurt said, we're trying to go through it all and so forth. And we'll be even more careful to say, this is what a witness told us in the future.
And so your team hasn't been able to look fully into that and confirm whether it was or was not Nolan that said
No,
that?
we have audio people doing it, but we know certain people said it was him, and there are certain people said it was not him.
insisting it really was Nolan's voice in that clip. Nobody in law enforcement has confirmed either version, and as of right now, there's been no official interrogation of anyone who was on that boat with him, which means almost everything we're hearing is coming from secondhand accounts, attorneys, and family statements.
Homicide, murder,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, there's so much still we don't know, but we do know there was some statements about there being an argument, whether that was Nolan in the argument or somebody else. So we don't know if there was some sort of altercation or fight. There was no interrogations of by law enforcement of the individuals who were with him the day afterwards. Right? There's been none of that we know of that law enforcement has questioned any of these people who were out there on this boat at the island with Nolan Wells. So we don't know what happened, whether it was an argument, whether it was a fight, whether they knew that he was in a position where he could not swim and fend for himself in the water. So all that is stuff that we don't know. And hopefully from this independent investigation and hopefully from the Sheriff's Department and DA to get some more information that can lead them to come to a definitive conclusion.
Not sworn testimony. None of this is easy on Nolan's family either. While all of this unfolds in headlines and comment sections, his parents are still planning a funeral for their son, all while leaning on their community for support and
Accounts, police are still searching for any images or videos unedited that could provide insight into what happened that day. And the family, again, is still waiting for answers while planning their son's funeral. Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, spoke about what the family has been going through.
Thank you so much. Just the outpouring of love, support. We've had some local officials. Mayor Casey Vaughn from Gaucher has reached out to us. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. He has, it's almost been every day. He's been texting to check on us. Also, Jeffrey Hullum, thank you so much. He's been texting pretty much every day, receiving a lot of stories from Nolan's teachers, which just warms my heart. His